Second service, we doing all right? Yeah. Fantastic. It's great. Always someone super stoked. Awesome. That was great. And great to be here with you. If we've not met, my name is Forrest, and I'm on the team here at Neighborhood. And welcome to Reset. Right? We are not restarting because we never stopped, but we are resetting. We do want to just take a moment, sort of pause, step back, kind of evaluate where we've been over the last 18 months, but then look forward to where it is we want to go and how together we are helping to accomplish that, right? That it's not just sort of the paid staff, but it is all of us sort of saying, hey, this is our church. Let's reset together, but also ask the question, how can I personally reset? It's been a crazy 18 months for all of us, not just as a church, but as individuals. And every once in a while, it's good to sort of step back and just pause and say, I think I need to reset my faith journey. And so that's kind of what we're doing over the next 4 weeks. And we're really asking 2 questions in all of that. And the first question is a very corporate question. And the question is, how can I help? We talked about this last week. How can I help Neighborhood be the kind of church that I love coming to, but also feel comfortable inviting my friends and family and classmates and coworkers to? I mean, how can I help unlock Neighborhood's potential in our community? How can I move from seeing myself as simply a guest here, but as a family member here? You know, it's interesting. Sometimes I hear people talk about Neighborhood, and they'll say this phrase. It's kind of unique to Visalia, honestly. I haven't heard it really anywhere else. I'm sure it is, but I've never experienced it. But I hear phrases like this. You're my home church, right? You've maybe even said that. People will say that to me. Oh, Forrest, I'll see them out in, at Save Mart or Costco or whatever. Oh, Neighborhood is, and they'll say it like this, still my home church. And that's kind of code for, I know you haven't seen me since last Christmas. But when people ask, you're my home church, right? And I'm like, that's awesome, right? So it's kind of people's way, I think, of, alleviating guilt when they run into the pastor out in public. But it's also sort of just a way of socially sort of identifying, right? People say, oh, where do you go to church? Oh, I go to church. Neighborhood's my home church. And all of that's fine. I'm not really critiquing it that much. But I think what I don't hear people use that phrase, home church, in regards to, though, how I kind of understand the phrase. If it's my home church, I actually see this as a space that I share with my extended spiritual family, and I feel some sort of responsibility for making it extraordinary. Like, maybe we could just frame it like this. Like, how do I move from talking about Neighborhood as the church I attend to this actually being like my church? Like, I have some ownership in the success or failure, health or unhealth of the organization. And that I understand that God has gifted me in unique ways, and I actually want to be intentional about investing those gifts into the church family. Right? And these are important questions, I think, for us to sort of bounce around in our heads a little bit, because, as we said last week, we cannot create a healthy church on consumers alone, right? We can't do that. We can't just have people here that consume the mission of Neighborhood. We actually need people to participate in the mission of Neighborhood if we are going to unlock our potential out in the community. And we said, again, last week, the reason we can't have a healthy church on consumers alone is that consumers will desert you at a moment's notice because they have no commitments beyond meeting their own needs. And so the moment you stop, Forrest, meeting my needs, I didn't like that sermon last week, we just go find another home church. And we wait until that guy says something we don't like, and then we go to another, right? We don't ever pause to say, how can I sort of help this place be the place I need it to be for me, but also for the people that aren't here yet? So when we talk about reset, we first start and say, how can I be a part of this extended spiritual family? How can I help? But that's the first question. The second question is, how can I grow? How can I grow? What are those things that not only that I'm doing for us, but what are the things that I need to do to personally reset? What are those things that I need to begin to do that will move me towards a better version of myself? Are there habits, are there postures, right, that I can adopt or install in my life that will create growth? What are those habits that I can begin to pick up that will create an environment in my life that facilitates me personally growing? And this is an important idea because Jesus most often did not invite people to believe in him. He invited people to follow him, right? He says, follow me, learn my way of other-centered love. That was his invitation. In fact, if you read the biographies that we have of his life, what you discover is probably for every 9 times he talks about following him, he one time will mention believing in him. He invited people to follow him before he invited people to believe in him. Why? Because the follow part is the hard part. Believing is easy. Oh, I've come to some intellectual understanding. Sure, I have my doubts, but I'm good believing, right? That's easy. It's less demanding. It doesn't require any change, right? You just decide in your head, right? But following is very different. This requires some external movement. It requires doing. More importantly, it actually requires, if we're following Jesus, adopting a particular way of being and in the world and responding to the world, namely with love, sacrificial, other-centered love, right? That we would not be people who simply believe, but we have this very active, sort of all-in, gritty, daily, relational, in the thick of things kind of faith as we follow Jesus. Jesus' agenda was always that we would move beyond believism and into this activated type of faith. And I think this is a challenge because, especially for those of you that have sort of grown up church folk, America over the last 70 years, the church in big kind of American church in general, big broad brushstroke here, but we've sort of converted Christianity to follow and into a culture of belief, right? Just believe in Jesus and say the prayer, you're all good, right? And many of you have. You've said a prayer. You've helped lead your kids in a prayer, right? I mean, it's all about this prayer. There's no follow. I mean, what does that have to do with anything? And this actually has become so ingrained in some streams of Christianity that people are very sort of skeptic when someone like me stands on stage and says, there's actually some doing involved in this thing, right? That you do have to sort of wake up and make active decisions. In fact, many streams in Christianity actually see doing as some sort of obstacle to what Christians call grace. Now, if you're new to the idea of grace, or you've never kind of heard it within a Christian context, let me just tell you, it's a very, very big deal, right? Christianity believes that Jesus hands us this free gift of what we call grace, which essentially says you do not have to perform, you cannot earn your way to the divine. You don't have to do religious hoops, unnecessary. They're all gone. Grace says that your future is decided and it's in your favor. Grace is kind of this God sort of clicking, dragging, and dropping your future into the present and just declaring you are right with me. You and I are in good shape. Grace says even if you're unfaithful, God is faithful and will come through on his promises. Again, grace, very, very cool concept. And again, it's free. You can't earn it, right? But here's the thing. It doesn't mean you don't have anything to do. Right? I love how the late Christian philosopher and thinker, his name was Dallas Willard, he said it as best as anyone's ever going to say it ever in the history of the world. Here's how he put it. Grace is opposed to earning. You're not going to earn your way to God because of grace. But grace is not opposed to effort. You have to try. Right? You have to try to follow Jesus. It's not magic. It takes effort to learn the way of grace and love that Jesus came to offer. Jesus didn't invite people to simply believe things. He invited people to follow him into the grind of their everyday life. You don't just receive grace, right? You don't just receive grace. We're supposed to learn to live out of grace, right? That was Jesus' invitation, and it's never been altered by him. Occasionally in the church, we alter it, and we just say, grace, 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 grace. Well, what do I have to do? Nothing, don't worry about it. That's not the case, in fact. Following Jesus requires taking his way of love right into our everyday lives, that we wake up every day. We're asking questions like, what should I do? How should I live? How should I respond? How should I react? What should I attempt? What should I initiate? What should I avoid? Right? That imagine just if you were confident, if you got the believism thing right, you're confident Jesus is who he says he is, and that his way of love that he's inviting you into is in fact the key to unlocking your potential as a human. If you believe that, then what would you do? Is the next question, or what should you do? We sum up all those questions around here. We just say, ask yourself this question in every situation. What does love require of me? What does love require of me? In this relationship, in this day, in this moment in time, what does love require of me? How can I grow? And every day you ask the question, what does love require of me? And every day you answer that question and then do something, your faith grows. I mean, that's kind of how it works over a lifetime, right? That's it. How can I grow? And here's what we've said in this series, and this is important because around here we say things, yes, sometimes I'm up here and I ask you like 4 things. Hey, we need this from you, but it's always rooted in what I actually want for you. And so when we talk about the how can I help question and this big corporate, like there's just some things we need to do together. The answer to that question is the same answer to the question, how can I grow? They work together, that your personal growth towards Jesus helps us, all of us as a faith community thrive. And us thriving as a faith community enables you to grow. Right? It's this win-win kind of thing. And it's what I really want for you. To understand that your growth is actually dependent in many ways on the health of our church, and the health of our church is dependent on your growth. And we introduced this concept. We said, listen, we're going to bring up 4 kind of movements in our lives, 4 habits we can install that are going to create an environment, 1, for a healthy us, but 2, a growing you. And the answers are the same. And we introduced the idea last week when we said the first sort of habit we want to install, the first sort of posture towards life is to live beyond yourself. That as a church, together, and as individuals, we learn to see ourselves as a tool to benefit the world. That's it. We see ourselves as a tool to benefit the world. That my growth is actually not just for me, it's for the people I bump into every single day. And we said, listen, the environment we create here for all of us to kind of take part in this idea of living beyond yourself are our monthly 4 projects. So easy. This is like low-hanging fruit. Just you actually have 12 opportunities every year to practice living beyond yourself through our monthly 4 projects, right? And it's kind of how we accomplish our mission of being for our community, right? As a church, we want to add value to the place we call home by partnering with local nonprofits that we just think are doing amazing work out in the community. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We just find people who are doing awesome stuff and say, can we help? Can we help? These are super easy, and it's just one way you can kind of learn to practice living beyond yourself. And remember, it was mentioned in the host segment, but I'm going to lean in just again for a moment. This month, our 4 project is partnering with Sleep in Heavenly Peace. Phenomenal. They make beds for kids that don't have beds, right? It was started by a couple right here in our church. And when we came to them and said, hey, how can we help? They said, we have beds, we need bedding. And so the 4 project this month is for you to go to Target or Walmart or wherever and you buy bedding. Like they have those little, and it's all for twin beds, like twin bed in a bag or pillows or sheets or any combination of that. And we said, we want us 100% participation. I want Target to call me going, what are you doing? I can't keep twin stuff in stock, right? And I want the Sleep in Heavenly Peace people to be like, we will never not have enough bedding, right? That's the kind of impact that we actually can make together, but individually, when you practice that stuff, it grows you. But here's the thing, we just can't stop with the idea of like what we offer the world. We can't stop there, and I'll tell you why. Have you ever met a family that on the outside seemed perfect? Right? Perfect. I mean, you look at their Instagram and you're like, those people are literally beautiful. Right? All of them. Every single, right? They're totally together. Everyone's successful. They know all the right people. And then you got to know them and you were like, ew. Right? Like, what? Marriage is on the rocks. They're in over their heads in debt. Their kids are a mess. There's no healthy relationship between the kids and the parents, right? I mean, and there's this huge disconnect between sort of their public reputation and what they're maintaining out there for everybody and what it's like in their real lives, their everyday private life. I mean, we've experienced that. We've bumped into that. Well, just like that can happen in any particular family, it can also occur within a church family. Everybody in the community loves what we do for them. Neighborhood Church has a phenomenal reputation out in the community, right? We do a ton. We get awards. I mean, people are signing things and handing us stuff. I mean, people love you and what you're offering the community. But what if things were a mess back home? Gossip, right? Unhealthy leadership. It's probably true if I'm your leader, right? Nobody's growing, right? We put on this great face for the community, but there's no life back home. See, I think the way to prevent that is really this next growth catalyst that I want to talk about. And we just call it helping out. Helping out. Right? As a part of the family that we call neighborhood, have you decided to help out? Have you decided to make sure, to do your part, to make sure that our reputation out in the community matches who we are back at home? How are you not just adding value to the place where we live, but how are you adding value to your extended spiritual family? Have you committed to helping out in a ministry here so that we can stay healthy back home? And this is important. And again, we just keep saying this, but right, because there are just some things we all need to do together to create the kind of church we want. But engaging in a personal ministry, you saying, I'm going to help out with, junior high kids because God will actually love you more, I'm convinced, if you help out with junior high kids, right? If you say, I'm going to do that, yes, to do that grows you. Yes, it helps us create a healthy church where, we're investing in kids' lives and it's awesome, but you'll grow from that decision. A personal ministry is a growth catalyst in your life. Again, it's a win-win. And here's how I know this. 25 years of experience as a pastor. You saying yes to helping out and engaging in ministry here at Neighborhood will be a catalyst for God to show up in big, big ways in your life. Because I have heard probably thousands of people share their faith story. And most of the time when people share their faith story, you know what they say? They tell about a moment when they stepped out of their comfort zone to serve somebody else in a way that they didn't feel prepared for. Almost every story that talks about Jesus and what Jesus has done in their life has a moment in it that says, I said yes to some lunatic pastor at my church, and it changed my life. I didn't feel adequate. I didn't feel prepared. I just knew I was supposed to do it, so I did it. Or Forrest is really, the guilt thing was heavy that day, and I just said yes. Right? You stepped out, and you served somebody in Jesus' name because you felt a nudge. I actually still remember the first time I sort of felt that. I had just become a Christian. I'm 19 years old, and I became friends with the youth pastor at this little church. And I didn't know this at the time, and this is strategy. By the way, if any of us pastors ask you to lunch, this is what we're doing. We're just priming the pump. So, right, but he's like, a few times we had lunch together, and it was great. And then at one of the lunches, he just said, hey, have you ever thought about helping out with the youth group? And I said, no, I did. Is that what you do? I just didn't even know what he was talking about. I've just been a Christian a few months. And he said, yeah, you just come and hang out with the kids. It's a lot of fun. And I was like, Let me tell you 2 reasons why that's a horrible idea, and now I'm questioning your leadership. Number 1, I don't even know if I'm going to stay Christian at this point, right? I should not be telling kids about this. And 2, I'm in fact still a teenager. I am 19 years old. There has to be rules against that, right? And he said, no, you'll be fine. And somehow I was, it was enough lunches. I just said, sure, I'll help out. At the end of the day, I said, yes. And I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know how it would turn out. I, in fact, was anticipating it turning out really poorly. I didn't have the resources. There's no guarantee of success. I just jumped in. I just showed up, right? And here's what I learned from that experience, and what I've learned over 25 years of hearing people tell their story, is that on the other side of your yes is God's faithfulness. On the other side of your yes is an experience, a bumping into God's faithfulness in your life. What I've realized in my life is that when you push through your inadequacy to say yes to God for the benefit of other people, it just grows your faith. It just does. It blows your faith up in really big ways. When you push through all the excuses, I don't have the time. Nobody has the time. Everybody's busy. You're not the only one. Everybody's busy. In fact, I'll tell you this. Our full-time staff, they volunteer 4 hours of their time every week because they run around asking you for help. We actually make them work 4 hours we don't pay them for, right? Because we said, listen, you've got to do what other people work full-time too, right? And so we said, listen, I don't have time. I'm scared, right? I'm too old. Maybe some of you are. No, I'm just kidding. I'm too young, whatever it is. But when we push through our inadequacy, on the other side of that, it's God's faithfulness. And when the two meet, our faith blows up. Let me tell you a story. Can I tell you a story? It's not my notes, but I told it last service, and it's a great story. I love telling this story. Like 20 years ago, before I got here, by the way, August 1st, 14 years at Neighborhood Church. Celebrated my 14th anniversary. Yeah, very cool. You guys haven't kicked me out yet, so that probably says something about you. But like 20 years ago, I'm at this little church up in Fresno, and I get convinced by like the 2 college kids we did have that we should start a college ministry. And I'm like, that's a really bad idea. There are no college kids at this church. They said, no, it'll be fine. We'll go get people. It'll be really great. And so what I did after they convinced me to start this thing, I went to all of the we call them senior saints, the older people at our church. And I said, hey, we're trying to start this college ministry. We'd love to have a bunch of college kids here, but I don't really know how to get them here other than free food. They're not living at home. They're living in dorms. They have meal plans. I mean, if we fed them a nice home-cooked meal once a week, this could be something. And I said, so what I need you to do, 1, I need you to spend your money. I'm not going to pay for the food. I want you to pay for the food, and I want you to cook the food, and I want you to serve the food. It'll work. They said yes. They said yes. So this huge group, they said yes, and they were buying the food and cooking the food and serving the food and cleaning up. I mean, it was this amazing thing. And like hundreds of college kids started coming. It was like crazy. In fact, one of our staff members today actually was a kind of a founding member of that college ministry. You should feel really bad for her. She has not been able to get rid of me now for a lot of years, right? But she's here working. But I remember one guy, his name was Pete. Pete was in his 90s. And he says to me, I'm too old. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, but I want to help. Can I help? I said, Pete, of course you can help. I mean, let me get you connected with everybody and you can kind of help out. And I don't know how much Pete actually did. And here's the thing. I asked, after a little while, I asked Pete, I said, Pete, you've been doing so great. Can I take you out to dinner? And my wife and I, we took Pete out to dinner. And I said, Pete, where do you want to go? You know, sometimes you say, hey, can I buy you dinner, buy you lunch? And then most people are kind of polite, like, yeah, we can just go get a sandwich or something somewhere. Pete goes, I like steak. I was like, okay, we're doing steak, Pete. And Not joking, he starts choking. I mean, Heimlich, the whole thing. I thought I killed Pete. I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, it was crazy. But here's the thing about Pete. Every time the senior saints would cook and clean up, and then they'd sit in the back in a separate room, and they would kind of have their dinner and just talk, and it was kind of like a little small group experience for them. But Pete would never sit back there. Pete would come out during the music time. I mean, loud. I mean, it's definitely college minute. You think this is loud? I mean, we were just blasting people's ears off. And Pete would be in the back, and he'd always just be worshiping, hands up, head down, eyes closed, just kind of all engaged. And finally I asked Pete, do you like the music? And Pete said, no. I don't like the music. What I like is seeing college kids worship. And he said, I show up because I get to help that. And it's done more for my faith in the last 20 years of my life than anything else I've ever done. And I said, Pete, I'm going to tell your story the rest of your life and beyond, because Pete's not with us anymore. He was 90, 20 years ago, if that tells you anything. Right? But that's what happens. If we can push through the I can't, I'm whatever, and just say yes, when that decision of ours meets the faithfulness of Jesus, our faith gets bigger. That's the formula. And actually, this is how Jesus operated. I mean, if you read the biographies of his life, he had this crazy, oversized assumption about what his followers were able to pull off. I mean, he was constantly sort of pushing them into situations that they weren't ready for, that they weren't prepared for, that they were way in over their heads. Right? I mean, it's really funny. These guys are flailing about. They're telling Jesus no. They're failing again and again and again. Absolute train wreck if we didn't know the story afterwards. That these 12 that actually became 11 because one didn't make it, but still 11 out of 12, good odds. I mean, they changed the world. You're actually here because of those 11. And Jesus was just constantly creating these moments. And there's this one moment I just love and I still just don't really get. Jesus is sitting the 12 down, call them disciples, right? His first followers. Sitting the 12 down, it's this big vision cast moment that Jesus is giving them. And here's what he says. I mean, just imagine hearing this, because we kind of are hearing it. Here's what Jesus said. Very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I've been doing. That's a big statement all by itself, but he's not done. And they will do even greater things than these. What? Jesus is saying, listen, you're not only going to do your yes. Here's what your yes is going to produce. It's not just going to produce what I'm doing. It's going to produce greater things than what I'm doing. And again, see the forward thinking in Jesus? He's not just saying you, he's saying they, as in you're part of the they. I'm part of the they. And maybe my favorite example, best example, right, is there's this moment that gets recorded. Jesus, he's been teaching all day. I mean, I know Jesus is probably a pretty good preacher, but all day. And everybody's getting tired, and it's hot because it's Israel, right? And but thousands, we're told, have gathered on this hillside, and it's moving towards dinner time, and it's the first century. There's no restaurants. There's no DoorDash. There is none of that. Right? There are thousands of people. They're all there. And Jesus' followers, again, his disciples, right? They come to him. They're tired. They're worn out. They're hungry. And they say, Jesus, idea, dinner break. Can we just take a minute, buddy, and eat? And here's how it gets recorded, actually. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place. It's already getting late. That's code for we're done. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food. And then Jesus sort of stares out at the crowd, and he turns. I could just see him smiling at his followers, his disciples. And then he says this, they don't need to go away. You solve the problem. You give them something to eat. Now, why would Jesus say that? I mean, what's he trying to accomplish? I mean, here's what's happening, right? The disciples are asking Jesus for something. Send them away so they can eat. And Jesus' response is, I'm going to ask you for something. You feed them. You want me to do something? You do something. Jesus is saying to them, why me? Why are you involving me in this? This is a problem you all can solve. You do it. And it's really interesting. This story, it's called the feeding of the 5,000. It actually gets recorded by all 4 biographers of Jesus' life. It doesn't happen with all the stories, but this story it does. Right? And one of the biographies is written by arguably Jesus' very best friend. His name was John. And John adds a line to the story that I think is awesome. Here's what John says after this moment. No, they don't need to go away. You give them something. John adds, he asked this only to test them, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. I love that. Jesus is on purpose messing with his people. Right? He's like, yeah, I want to teach them that when they push through their inadequacy, they will meet my faithfulness and something remarkable will happen. Right? And Jesus knows, he knows he's asking the impossible. We're told they don't even have enough food. There's thousands of people, and here's what they have. We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Again, I love this moment because if John's right, and Jesus was just doing all of this to test them, to mess with them, to put them in a situation where if they respond with a yes, their faith will grow, right? He knows they're incapable. He knew they didn't have what it took, right? Thousands of people, 1 lunch. Now again, if you have been tuning out and not hearing anything, hear what Jesus says next because it is the most important part. But we only have, Jesus, you're insane. There's like thousands. I'm tired. Everybody's tired. I guess you're not, Jesus, but whatever. Like, we don't have what it takes. And here's Jesus' response to all of this. Well, then just give me what you have. Just bring it here. Here's the thing. I think this invitation to the disciples in this moment is our invitation too. I know you don't have all the things you need, but bring me what you have. Just bring me what you have. I know that there's some inadequacy. I know you're not prepared. I know there's not, just bring me what you have. Right? Don't miss what Jesus is doing. Jesus says, you want me to do something for you? Great, help. Right? Just help. You want me to do something big? You've been praying for some move of God in the community? Great. Help. Bring me what you have. Just bring me what I know you don't have enough. Bring me what you have, though. You get to help. Don't just come to me to solve all your problems. You help. This is how we do this thing. Bring me what you have. Here's how the story ends, if you've never heard it. And he, Jesus, directed the people to sit down on the grass. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. I mean, pretty cool, right? Pretty cool. But here's what I want you to see. These guys did what they knew how to do. Here's my lunch. And then they just trusted that Jesus knew what he was doing. They did what they knew how to do, and they trusted that somehow Jesus was going to come through with that. And their active kind of follow me faith intersected with Jesus' faithfulness, and something remarkable happened. That's it. You know, more than 25 years ago, I said yes to helping my buddy out. I had no idea what my yes would lead to. I had no idea what hung in the balance of my yes. I mean, if I hadn't said yes 25 years ago, am I standing here today? Am I your pastor? I mean, probably not, actually. And here's the thing. I think the same is true for you. Not that you're going to become a pastor. I just think you'll never know everything that hangs in the balance of your decision to step out and decide to help out. You'll never know what could be if you don't push through and say yes. And let what you have intersect with what Jesus has and let something remarkable happen. You'll never know if you don't say yes. I mean, I think the one thing we do know is that what hangs in the balance is the strength of your faith. Because your yes to helping out positions you to experience God's power in your weakness. It positions us to experience God's faithfulness in response to, I'll just give you what I have kind of faith. I mean, here's what I believe because I've seen it again and again and again, and I've seen it in my own life. I believe there's someone whose life, whose child, whose marriage, whose grandkid, whose faith will be changed once you step up and decide to just help out. And to take what you have, not kind of sweat what you don't have, just take what you have and just make it available. Here you go, Jesus. Here's my lunch. Do what you do now. I think your yes to that, to just saying, here's what I have, Jesus, that unlocks a story that's yet to be told. And Jesus saying, just bring me what you have and let's see what happens. You do what only you can do, and I'll do what only I can do, and together I think we'll be amazed at what happens. And that's why there's cards on your seat. I want to invite you to take your lunch, to just take what you have, offer it to Jesus, and see what happens. See if I'm right. Will you saying yes to helping out, when it intersects with Jesus' faithfulness, will something remarkable happen? I dare you. I dare you. I've seen it again and again and again, and it's what I want for you. Because I think it's one way that God blows our faith up. And so, you've got cards on your seat. Here's what you do. You take the card, you take it out to the table. Our staff is out there. They're all wearing Reset t-shirts. And they will take your card. There are 11 different ministry departments here. There is something, right? Again, if you really want to go to heaven, junior high. If you're like, I'm already pretty good, you can drive the golf cart, right? It's a cool thing, right? But listen, there are things we all need to do together to create the kind of church that we love. But personally, that yes intersects with Jesus' faithfulness, and your faith blows up, right? So you'll take your card, you'll fill out your name and your number, and you'll say, give me a card, I want to more. You're not committing your life away, you're not doing any of that. All you're saying is, why don't you give me a call? Pete got steak, so, we actually are bribing you. If you hand us a card today, free t-shirt. Now, I said what was on the shirt wrong last service, and so I got yelled at by our team. It says something very inspirational. I'll just say that. And so here's the thing. That's what I want you to do. I want you to offer Jesus your lunch today, and just see what happens. See what remarkable thing can happen in your life and in our church. Does that sound okay? And don't think about. Listen, you feel guilty right now, so you'll do it. If you leave here without going to the table, you'll never do it. Because by Tuesday, you're like, I don't even know what Forrest talked about. I mean, it's fine. And he'll be on to the next thing. We're good. We're in the clear. So don't play that game. Go to the table, fill out the card, say, there's 11. Tell me about them. I'll pick one. Right? Does that sound okay? Yeah? Let's pray. Jesus, thanks. Thanks so much for, your invitation to go beyond believism and to follow you. Your invitation to hand you what we have and see what happens when it bumps into your faithfulness. Help us to be people who follow you into the grind of our everyday.